Girls, this is the third session of the first chapter, Leela'S Friend, of your English textbook, Mindscapes. So far, we have known that Siddha was appointed as a servant in Leela'S house. They became very good friends. With each passing day, they grew closer to each other than before. Leela even made it a habit of listening to stories narrated by Siddha at her bedtime. I mean to say that it is seen in the story that Leela wanted Siddha to be beside her in all her waking hours. But something very unprecedented happened, and it turned out to be tragic in reality. Later in the story we see that it was a strange revelation from Leela that Siddha was ill-treated by Mrs. Shiv Shankar. She made him think that he was a mere servant and not at all equal to his master. Consequently, he vanished one day, and as a result of this, Leela got depressed and started interrogating her mother for her misconduct towards Siddha. So, this was what we have done in the last session. And from this part, we may have quite a few questions like Leela played a teacher to Siddha. Describe in brief the role played by her. Number 2, day by day she clung closer to him. Illustrate this statement. Number 3, what happened after which Siddha vanished into the night? Number 4, why was it impossible for Mrs. Shiv Shankar to tell a story to her daughter at night? And number 5, Leela made a noise of deprecation. What made Leela do that? So now these are the certain questions that can be framed from the last part of this story we have done. Now let us move into the last part of the story and let us discuss the story finally, and let us see what happens ultimately to Siddha. Now let us start the story and continue it. He has been in jail half a dozen times for stealing jewelry from children. From the description I gave, the inspector was able to identify him in a moment. This was said by Mr. Shiv Shankar when he came home after going to the police station. And he had lodged a complaint about Siddha. This was very obvious. And the inspector also, hearing to the appearance of that person, he immediately identified that it was Siddha, and he had done it before also. Where is he now? Asked the wife. The police know his haunts. They will pick him up very soon. Don't worry. The inspector was furious that I didn't consult him before employing him. Now see, this is a rule in our country also, perhaps in every country, that before employing or engaging or appointing somebody as your house help or a servant or a maid servant, you have to give all the details or inform the police about the person to be engaged. Okay? And this was not done by this couple before engaging Siddha as their house help. So this was a kind of fault according to Mr. Shiv Shankar. And this was said by the inspector also. 4 days later, just as father was coming home from the office, a police inspector and a constable brought in Siddha. Siddha stood with bowed head. Leela was overjoyed. Siddha, Siddha, she cried, and ran down the steps to meet him. Now see, this was a moment to reckon, a moment to rejoice for Siddha. Sorry, for Siddha and for Leela also. Both the friends were meeting once again. And Leela was just leaps and bounds, and she was very much happy that her very dear friend once again had come over to her, and they will once again pass the time very nicely and very enjoyfully, and she would be able to play with him. But that was not the reality. Don't go near him. A very strict instruction from the inspector to Leela. Why not? And Leela was not up to listening to the instruction of the inspector, because she knew no thief in Siddha. She knew only a friend, very dear friend in Siddha. This was natural for Leela. This was very obvious for Leela. So she was very much prompt to counter the question of the inspector. She said, "Why not?" The inspector replied in a very gruff voice, "He is a thief. He has taken away your gold chain. Let him." Though this was not clarified, this was not verified, but still he was taken to be a thief. Let him. I will have a new chain. Now see, for a child, literally for the children, material things do not matter so much. What matters to them is the person. What matters to them is the feelings from the person, the emotion, the love, the care, the affection. That only matters to them. So she says, "Let him. I'll have a new chain." So you can well understand that chain was not a matter of importance to Leela, but Siddha was. Leela said, and all of them laughed. And then Mr. Shivshankar spoke to Siddha, and then his wife addressed him with a few words on his treachery. Then they asked him where he had put the chain. The same question, the same interrogating questions were put to Siddha, but Siddha did not have a reply, because he didn't know where the chain was, because he was not the thief. He hadn't taken the chain. So how could he know where the chain was? "I have not taken it," Siddha said feebly, looking at the ground. Now see, the humble nature, the polite nature of this person, though he was a servant, maybe coming from a very downtrodden section of the society. And see, the humble nature, he was not at all looking straight into the eyes of his master also, in rage, in anger, in frustration. But he says, "I have not taken it," very politely. "Why did you run away without telling us?" asked Leela'S mother. There was no answer. So why did he run away? Siddha could have given a very apt answer, reply to Mrs. Shivshankar, but he did not. Leela'S face became red. "Oh, policeman, leave him alone. I want to play with him." "My dear child," said the police inspector, "he is a thief. So how can a child of a well-to-do family play with a thief?" This was what the inspector tried to say. But Leela was not, in a position, in a state of mind to listen to such stuff, because she had got once again her friend and she wanted to play. "Let him be," Leela replied haughtily. "A thief? Yes, he can be a thief, but Siddha is my friend also," she tried to say. "What a devil you must be to steal a thing from such an innocent child," remarked the inspector. Now you can see in this picture that how Leela was in desperation, how Leela tried to say that the policeman to leave Siddha to her because she wanted to play with him once again. And once again Siddha was very much badly being interrogated by all these people present over there, the inspector, Mr. and Mrs. Shivshankar also. So now, Leela'S father and mother too joined in this appeal. Leela felt disgusted with the whole business and said, "Leave him alone, he hasn't taken the chain. You are not at all a reliable prosecution witness, my child," observed the inspector humorously. Now, a little girl of 5 years cannot be a witness. This was uttered very firmly by the inspector. "No, he hasn't taken it." See, there is a mark of exclamation over here. This was a very firm statement from this little girl. She was very much confident. See the confidence in this little girl. But such confidence was absent in her parents. She says, "No, he hasn't taken it." Leela screamed. She was very desperate in her utterance. Her father said, "Baby, if you do not behave, I will be very angry with you." The father was trying to prevent his daughter, from saying so, from arguing with the policeman. Half an hour later, the inspector said to the constable, "Take him to the station. I think I shall have to sit with him tonight." The constable took Siddha by the hand and turned to go. Leela ran behind them crying, "Don't take him. Leave him here, leave him here." She clung to Siddha's hand. He looked at her mutely like an animal. Mr. Shivshankar carried Leela back into the house. Leela was in tears. So now here I will show you another picture in which you can see Leela crying and desperately running behind Siddha as Siddha was taken by the inspector by his hand. So you can see the desperation and how Siddha was trying to get back her dear friend as he was taken by the inspector. Every day when Mr. Shivshankar came home, he was asked by his wife, "Any news of the jewel?" and by his daughter, "Where is Siddha?" So now see the difference of questions from the two different characters, from the two family members of Mr. Shivshankar. One was his wife and another one was his daughter. So, for an adult, for a mature human being, the ornament, the jewel that was lost, was more important than a person. But to a little girl of 5 years, only Siddha, her dear friend, mattered to her. The ornament, the lost jewel, did not have any importance to Siddha. Leela, they still have him in the lockup, though he is stubborn and won't say anything about the jewel, said Mr. Shivshankar. Now Mr. Shivshankar said to his wife, that Siddha is in the lockup and he is not uttering a single word about the lost jewel. "Bah, what a rough fellow he must be," said his wife with a shiver. Now she got very angry and annoyed, and she says that yes, he must be a very rough fellow, he must be very rude, and yes, he would not say anything about the jewel. Oh, these fellows who have been in jail once or twice lose all fear. Nothing can make them confess. Now here, Mr. Shivshankar makes a very strong comment about Siddha. We know that Siddha was a very good human being. He was lovable. He loved his little girl, his friend Leela. But see, a very negative, very strong negative comments from this couple, Mr. and Mrs. Shivshankar. They do believe that Siddha had taken the jewel from their house. How could he? So he says that the people who once go to jail, they think what more can happen to them. So they lose all fear and nothing can make them confess. He will not say a single word about what had happened and what he did. A few days later, putting her hand into the tamarind pot in the kitchen, Leela'S mother picked up the chain. Now see, this was very unexpected for us, for all of us, isn't it, girls? A few days later, when everything had happened, Siddha was in jail still, and Leela was deserted. Leela was very sad in the house. Then a very unexpected and surprising incident happened. In the kitchen, when Leela'S mother put her hand into the tamarind pot, she got something. She took it and washed it under the tap, and the coating of tamarind got off from it, and she saw that it was unmistakably Leela'S chain. There was no doubt that it was Leela'S chain. When it was shown to her, Leela said, "Give it here, I want to wear the chain." See, this piece of gold did not matter to her. So, she was very simple in answer, very, very innocent to reply, to say, "Give it here, I want to wear the chain." How did it get into the tamarind pot? The mother was, very annoyed, and she started interrogating her daughter. "How did it get into the pot?" "Somehow," replied Leela. Isn't it a very, very obvious answer? Somehow. She did not know. "Did you put it in?" asked mother. Then the most important question from the mother to her daughter. "Did you put it in?" Was she responsible for this whole incident? Yes. When? Then the obvious answer, but very surprising answer, came from Leela. She had put the gold chain into the tamarind pot some day before. When? Long ago, the other day. She did not remember when did she do that, but she only remembered that it was long ago. "Why didn't you say so before?" "I don't know," said Leela. See, Leela was only worried about and concerned about her friend, Siddha. She was not concerned about anything else in this world, because she was too small to bother about all such things. What a gold chain would matter to her, because she doesn't know the value of gold. But the most important thing was to her dear friend Siddha. When father came home and was told, he said, "The child must not have any chain hereafter. Didn't I tell you that I saw her carrying it in her hand once or twice?" Then the father is saying that, "Yes, I have seen Leela carrying the chain in her hand. Is it a thing to be worn by a 5-year-old girl? She should not wear it once again. She must have dropped it into the pot some time. And maybe she had dropped it some time and she doesn't remember it. And all this bother on account of her." And really, in reality, we find that if she had remembered that the chain was in the tamarind pot, all the incident could not have happened. "What about Siddha?" asked mother. So once the question that was asked to her father by Leela about Siddha, the same question is being asked by Mrs. Shivsankar now, because he had got her gold ornament. Now she is worried about Siddha. But still, we see a very strong and firm remark, a very strict remark from Mr. Shivsankar. Let us see what he says at the very end of the story. "I will tell the inspector tomorrow. In any case, we couldn't have kept a criminal like him in the house." Now, do you think, girls, this was a very correct approach from Mr. Shivsankar? I don't think so, because it is a proven matter that Siddha did not take the chain, but still masters are masters and servants are servants. So this is the thing R.K. Narayan makes us to think over, to ponder over, and mark the discrimination, mark the distinction made by the so-called masters in the society. And we see that Siddha, not being a criminal, was tagged a criminal. He was called a thief. He was called a criminal. So now at this point of time, after finishing the chapter, girls, I would like to, frame certain questions from this chapter, rather this part of the story that we have now dealt with. The questions like this can be important for you, like what idea do you form about Leela from the story? Number 2, don't take him, leave him here. Who is the speaker and why did the speaker say this? Number 3, where did Leela'S mother find the chain? What was her reaction? Number 4, what a rough fellow he must be. Who said this and why? And lastly, give the character sketches of Mrs. Shiv Shankar and Siddha. That's all, and thank you.